we're ready to go. It's practically a full house. So welcome everyone. This is Talmud is here as well. Let me just. Some of you have been part of this conference from the beginning. You know, this is the 4th annual conference, and Chris, you've been here from the beginning. You know, these 4 years have just flown past from my point of view, and every year the conversation has evolved. We've had themes every year, and this year the themes are presence, emergence, and impact. And next year the theme is going to be synergy, serendipity, and synchronicity. So, you know, it's like I'm just really excited about how the conversation is evolving all the time. So today, each one of you has had a conversation with me already about presence, emergence, and impact. So I just want to give each one of you an opportunity to just introduce yourself to the group and to tell us what presence, emergence, and impact means to you in your work. And then after everyone's had a chance to share their own perspectives, then I'll ask for comments on what each one has said. So shall we start with you, Andy?
Hello there, welcome everyone. Welcome from Barry Island in Wales. Certainly the topic of presence. I see presence both as a physical sense, being at one with your environment, but also presence in a storytelling sense, in sense of a presence of being part of and aware of a wider narrative. Narrative, I would suggest, is a bridge between a story and its wider context. People often confuse storytelling and narrative as the same thing, whereas I use the analogy of a pearl necklace, that the pearls are the story and the string holding together is the narrative. So I believe very much about presence in both a physical sense and in a storytelling sense. And I'm passionate about emergence, because really the way forward for sustainable change is bottom-up led, and that's really primarily through emergence, what emerges from its environment. And I'm passionate that even though I have to wear a hearing aid, my greatest skill is listening or hearing, although my wife may disagree at times, and that listening, picking up what's going on around you, what's emerging from your environment, both the immediate provocations and stimuli, but also the patterns within it. And I think that sort of talent and ability to discern the wider picture, the wider narrative, really marks out a creative person. And in terms of impact, I wrestled for a while because I seem to be quite good at this thing called creativity and also storytelling, and I was slightly troubled for a while. Well, how can the two separate things? But then it realized actually that they're part of the same thing, that every story needs an idea and every idea needs a story. So linking into your themes, I mean, the creative person is fundamental, both for presence in their immediate world, the community they're looking to engage and help transform, emergence, about being aware of what emerges from around you, from the relationships, the dynamics between you, and the impact. I believe actually, unless you've got a clear narrative and story, your potential brilliance will not be realised. So just some quick thoughts from me there, Jessica.
Brilliant, thanks very much, Andy. Johanna, how about yourself?
Yes, well, I was just taking in what Andy said so very succinctly. There were so many different interesting points. So presence, emergence, and impact. For me, presence, I come from a theatre background, so I've worked a lot with presence in terms of stage presence, really, and how you generate stage presence. And I've worked a lot translating that into leadership presence and the awareness of how your presence communicates, how your presence impacts people, which brings me to the word of impact. I'm less using the word impact now and moving into influence, how we influence people, because it's more in, and which also relates to emergence for me, that idea that you know, there's always something emerging from within us and between us, and how do we ever really impact that, or do we influence that? One way we do that is with our presence. And, you know, there's lots of different layers to presence. There's that spiritual sense of presence. There's the energetics of presence. There's the, you know, the expressiveness of presence, and that can relate to congruence and narrative and story. So yeah, I've worked a lot in that realm, and more in emergence, and more interested in emergence through systems and systems theories, and how we listen to that and respond to that and work with that, in terms of, you know, my work, which is largely around facilitating dialogue, and how we generate that. How do we, and my presence impacts all, you know, influences all of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Johanna. Kobus, how about you?
Yeah, I think I was enormously blessed to have studied under the great Paul Torrance, regarded as Mr. Creativity of the 20th century. I went to specialize, doing a post-PhD under Torrance, and for more than 20 years, he remained my mentor, very close to me. And everything that, from a creativity perspective, happened under his guidance. And because I focused for so long on young children between 0 and 3, as a scientist, to get to the essence of the creativity of human being as a scientist, not as sort of airy-fairy stuff. And it became clear that, and I did this comparative study in 15 countries, that about 98% of these young children have creativity at a superior level. So my work and our organization, and we work in more than 60 countries, is that to get the creativity back that we all have. Because at the moment, we saw this again the past year, that there was so much lack of creativity in the world, especially amongst leaders, because what they saw the past 7 months, they saw the crisis as a problem, where true creativity people see this as an opportunity, as a possibility, and so on. So this has been my life mission. And as you know, we've also, we're having our 25th International Creativity Conference in October. That is what this is about too. And the theme is rich brain, poor brain. We should get away from our poor brain in our relationships, in our leaderships, in whatever we do, in our parenting and so on. That's how we have it. And as I said, this has been a joy for me, because especially in South Africa, my first client was actually the Office of Nelson Mandela when we started. And so it's an incredible journey for us. And the essence is that we all have this creativity, but it's just sort of happened along the way that it's not there anymore. You don't see it, but how to get it out. So.
Okay, yes, thanks very much, Kobus. So, yeah, for the rest of the participants, Kobus has the longest running creativity conference there in South Africa, as he mentioned. 25 years he's been running that. So excellent. Thank you for that. That continuity, Kobus, and also Torrance, one of the leaders in creativity, you know, one of the founding fathers of like the creativity psychometrics anyway. So yeah, well done for that. Let me go on to Moyra then. Moyra?
Oh, hello. So I'm Moyra Scott, and I'm a visual artist. I'm a painter, and I also teach, or facilitate workshops in creativity in terms of and using visual art as the medium, really. And what I'm really interested in terms of what creativity is for me is that the emergence and the creativity collide, in that when you get to that point where you don't actually know what you're going to be doing next, and you allow that, you kind of like manifest that kind of situation, so that you're right at the point of like, I don't know what's going to happen, you kind of have to make it up. So when you're kind of having to make it up, that's your creativity. It's very present, because you're right at the edge of your kind of like known, so you can only be present. And from that space, or that state of kind of creative flow, that is where, to me, pure creativity happens. So when I'm painting or when I am leading a painting workshop, that's the point I'm aiming to get people towards, is where it's not about the plan that they've got or the painting they're intending to make. It's that they are there with their paint and their paintbrush and their canvas, experimenting and seeing where it goes. And I thought it was very interesting that sort of Johanna and Andy were talking about listening. For me, it's like a mark making and a response. So it's in that sort of state of emergence, and that's how I paint. And that's when I'm sort of leading a workshop on it. That's how I'm kind of aiming for, to get people really present and into that space where they are creating and responding and creating and responding. In terms of impact, I think it's incredibly impactful, as Kobus was saying, to be in your creative mind, which as adults we can tend to grow out of, that very playful, experimental state. Just being in that state, I think is transformative.
Okay, and are those your paintings behind you, Moyra?
Yeah, that's one of mine. So there we go. That's the result of it, and that's one of the results of them. Yeah.
Very beautiful. Thank you. And David? David, your microphone is muted.
Yeah, sorry, I just unmuting myself because my headset's a bit loud. I'm listening very carefully to everybody, and I really like what Johanna was saying about influence rather than impact. But nonetheless, because of what Kobus says is so true, that we're all born creative, we're all creative, and it just gets thumped out of us. I am much keener on making an impact than I am with influencing, because I firmly believe that one of the reasons why our world is in a continuous repetitive spiral of disasters, particularly related to business, is because we're over-reliant on our rational pattern recognition side of our intelligence, and the creative side of our intelligence has been neatly shoveled into a box labeled art, where weirdos and freaks and other kinds of undesirables work and live. And until such time as we're able to liberate creativity from that bias, we're going to continue to have the kinds of problems we are having. And it comes back to this idea of working with systems. We're addicted to the idea that we live in a closed system that we can control, and we don't, and we can't. And if we don't change that attitude and engage with being open to ambiguity, being open to novelty, and looking at it as complex instead of some simple thing that can be controlled, we will never allow decent things to emerge. And a lot of what we do is going to have no impact. And it all comes back to being actually present, not hanging around in the area, but being present on all levels: physically, spiritually, intellectually, and observationally. So for me, actually, the longer I spend doing this, the more and more I begin to realize that so many of these things are just various sides of exactly the same coin. Creativity is not rational or irrational or irrational. It's both, depending on which part of the process you're looking at. And so for all of these, we pick these three words for this theme. In many ways, it's the same thing. You just can't have the one without the other. You can't have any of the three, of impact, presence, or emergence, without the others.
Yeah, great. So, David, this concept of systems, Talmud, in our conversation, we talked about systems, didn't we? So I thought maybe let me go on to you, Talmud.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks Jessica for having me. I'm part of the process. So just to say, I think I'm going to lead on a little bit from what David just explored. I think that the starting point is creativity as the kind of baseline for human kind of idea development in any context. And I think it's not about kind of compartmentalizing creativity. It's like, okay, now I'm going to go be creative. I think it's just a process, what we do. And I think I've shared before, I think the way you structure your thoughts and organize your day, your plans, your strategies, it's all creative. If you're an accountant, the way you approach what you do is creative, and your passion may well be in number, I think it's the pattern of how we put things together. If you're a stay-at-home parent, the way you need to get things happening, organize a house, whatever it is, I think it's just what it is. If it becomes a canvas, it becomes textures of oil and acrylic. If it becomes about organizing people, I think that's a kind of baseline. I think from that principle, you then get a sense of emergence. And I think all of what we're talking about is both behavioral, theoretical and actual. So you can emerge in a creative sense with ideas and a journey you're taking. You can emerge in a theoretical sense in terms of theories and practice. You can emerge in an actual sense in terms of becoming more pronounced in a particular field or a particular discipline. So I think once you have that creativity, then you emerge into a space. And then when you want to have a sense of yourself in that space, you have a sense of presence. And then you have a presence within that space. And again, it could be a presence in a sense of yourself. And there's a difference between, for example, where you are journeying with an idea and you have that kind of welcomed ambiguity and fluidity. And when you arrive at a certain point, and then how you interact with people and how you communicate that idea is very, very present. And again, it translates across different kind of areas of kind of knowing. And in that presence, you're in a space where you can look at impact. And I like the way there's a fluidity between impact and influence. And I think it goes back to what your drivers are. And I think the driver for what your intentions are will determine the nature of the impact and the influence you have. And it's like, what is the purpose of what you're aspiring to? And that will determine where your impact rests. So, for example, in leading to systems, I think the systems will support the process. And I think sometimes we get the tail to wag the dog. I think we do this with language. We will use language to define experience and then be led by the language and then be upset when the experience doesn't match, so a bit like, stay within the experience of what it is and use the language as a marker. And I think when you have a system, it supports what takes place. So for example, if you have a creative pathway and you want it to flourish and be supported, you create systems to support its development, to ensure that there are things in place that is sustained beyond your input. Now, the key thing is not being fixed. So there is a point when those systems will become redundant, and that is very natural, but it's kind of been open to that redundancy, and then almost cyclical, that process happening again based on the current situation, what has emerged, what is the current perception of creativity at that space, and then again you review, and then you create new systems to support it. But it's the idea that these structures are meant to evolve, and they're meant to be changed, and they're meant to be responsive to the kind of emerging creativity as it takes its journey.
Okay, great. Thank you, Talmud. Let me go on to Alan then.
Okay. Good morning. I'm in Redditch in the middle of England, and I'm a management coach, trainer, author and speaker. I'm going to look at presence, emergence and impact from a management point of view in organisations. A lot of the time, managers aren't present either with themselves. I think there's a triangle. I picture a triangle of a manager, their people and their customers or users, of even if they've got a single process that they're responsible for, there's somebody who uses what they produce, whether that's a tangible product or a service. And I think the managers too infrequently don't ask themselves the question, what's happening, about how am I feeling in a certain situation, or what's happening with my team, or what's happening with my customers or users. And it's a really important aspect of management that managers are aware of themselves and their surroundings, which leads me into emergence, because all that happens around us is emergent from systems, whether they're local systems of human construction, or whether they're the wider community or the whole of the planet or solar system. or even the whole cosmos, then we try and impose a system on something that's already having interactions and causing whatever happens to emerge. And too frequently, managers feel that they can control situations, or politicians feel, relative to earlier comment about politicians feeling that they're controlling the situation when they're really possibly their impact is only going to be marginal and depends on how they're interacting with everybody around them. I think to produce value from one's actions, whether that's in creativity in artistic sense or create value in terms of an organizational sense, you've got to be aware of your situation. There's no use. I mean, in the context of presence, I always remember a TV program many years ago where some famous chief executive was working in an NHS hospital, and to prize the chief executive out of his office took immense patience and endurance on the part of the presenter to get them to actually go on to a ward. Well, that should never happen. Whoever is in a position of responsibility has to be present in the workplace, and perhaps with their customers, or in that case with patients. So the impact that any manager can have of whatever level, or even politicians, does depend on how aware they are of themselves, their team, and the people who are receiving what they produce, which is they have some influence on the situation, because their system does have an influence, but it has to be considered in the context of the wider system as well. So I see them all as interlinked, but if the managers aren't present, then things aren't going to work out right. And the current fiascos that we see our politicians in the UK going through, I think, shows how much lacking they are in awareness. So and that's me anyway.
Okay, thanks very much, Alan. Let me go on to Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say good morning, everybody, but we're all probably in different time zones. But thank you for those contributions. Everything's been very thought-provoking. I wanted to illustrate presence, emergence, and impact by looking a little into the past and then a glimpse into the future. We've just had in Birmingham, where I live, a Heritage Week, and I was asked to do a live stream broadcast around a local landmark called Edgbaston Reservoir. Now, the reservoir is around 200 years old, which is pretty old for Birmingham, and it was there because it was going to feed the new canal system that Thomas Telford had built. And he built the new canal system to expedite coal from the Black Country coalfields into Birmingham to feed the new steam engines. Now, the steam engine was an invention that really caused the origins of Birmingham as a city. Karl Marx had said that capitalism had the ability to conjure whole populations from the ground. And that's what Birmingham became, because in 1811, the population was about 70,000. By 20 years later, it was 144,000. And 40 years after that, it had added another 200,000. Whole population just conjured out of the ground by one element, which was the steam engine, which powered the factories that Birmingham then became a workshop for the world in its manufacture. So that was the impact and emergence of just one invention, and it had that great impact on the way the country was populated, because there were other inventions as well, so that in 1750, 15% of people in this country lived in towns. By 1870, it was 80% of people in Britain lived in towns. So you could see that, that as Alan was saying, these systems have a very big impact. Now, if we look into the future, can we predict what the new presence and emergent is going to be that's going to change the behaviors and the way the country is configured? And I think we're getting a hint of it now with this new epidemic, that it's going to change the way our towns are going to be designed. It's going to change behavior. People will want more space. There'll be a greater emphasis on nature and contact with nature, and the way people relate, the way we work are all going to change. And so we can start to predict and adapt and use our creativity and our versatility for the new framework we're all going to live in. And as the science fiction writer, what's his name? William Gilbert, is it? Gibson, sorry. William Gibson said, the future is here already, but it's unevenly distributed. So I throw those into the mix, but thank you for your contributions. I think it's been a very stimulating debate.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Chris. Let me move on to Dee now. Dee, your perspective on presence, emergence, and impact.
I'm just going to summarise it because of time. I'm an artist, so for me as an artist, it's about being aware when I'm creating, when I'm working, so that I can be open and broaden perspectives. When I'm painting, when I'm thinking of an idea, when I'm producing a piece, I want to inspire and awaken the unconscious minds of others. So that's me summing up my presence. The emergence is, so my presence is the awareness, the emergence is the openness, the broadenness, the awakening, the stimulation, and the impact is how's the population going to perceive my work, and what are they going to take away with that?
Thanks very much, Dee. Now, each one of us has a presence individually, and all of you panelists, you have a very powerful presence in the realm of creativity, and that is evident in your contributions today. And at the same time, we have a presence which is influenced by the presence of others. So combined, there's 10 of us on this call now, and each one of us is, as Johanna was talking about, the influence, we're influencing each other, and so there's that collective presence. And what I want to do over the coming year, I mentioned right at the beginning, is that the theme for next year's conference is synergy, synchronicity, serendipity. Those words will be familiar to each one of you, because a lot of the creatives, they always talk about these lucky coincidences that led to things emerging and new opportunities. And every week at 2 times, 10 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock in the evening, the 7 o'clock one, I think, is more the time differences with the US people. They'll prefer that time. And those in Australia, hopefully the 10 o'clock morning session will be good for you. And I know Johanna's got a lot of things that she wants to share. And I promised her that we would run a session after this conference. And I'm sure each one of you, if I spoke to you individually, you would be talking about things that you want to share. And there's just so much abundance between us. And hopefully we will keep this momentum going as we progress. And for me, my contribution is creating the space is creating this space for academics and artists who very often their paths don't cross. You know, they live in different worlds, and yet we're all passionate about creativity, and yet we inhabit these different worlds, which without a conscious effort to create a space, we don't have the opportunities to communicate with each other in a language that we all understand. So thank you very much. And final comments, anybody, before we sign off? Just maybe 30 seconds from each.
Yeah, I'd like to say, you know, what was really clear to me from the beginning, that your creativity alone just won't make it. You need other qualities to support your creativity. It needs to be that interaction, and because that has always been critical. And as Torrance said, creative people can perform miracles, but they're always in danger of crucifixion, which means without courage, your creativity just won't happen. And I think that's true for all of us.
Thank you.
I'd just say big thank you, Jez, for doing what you're doing here. I always say you can't create a Mexican wave by yourself, and you're doing a magnificent job here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd echo that too. And you know, it feels like this just feels like a taste. I can't wait for more. And I was pondering the themes that emerged between each of our contributions, and the themes of listening and the unconscious, themes of generating and generation, themes of the unknown. I don't know, I was interested to hear what, if anyone else, systems and the interconnectedness of what is it, presence or emergence?
Yes.
Life.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose the more we become aware of those, the more our reality expands in a way. We're broadening our vision through the diversity, you know, through being present with others who have a very different worldview to ourselves. That broadens our own perspective.
Welcome.
Yes, and I was wondering, something that came up for me was the interchangeable nature of present and presence. That was interesting. Where, yeah, it made me start thinking more about that.
And there's something about the presence with the temporal as well as like the present moment, and how that feels compared to the timeline element of it. Personally, anyway.
What I find interesting about this is that we are already journeying into innovation. So the diversity of perspectives and ideas across the spectrum of our understandings of creativity, emergence, impact, influence, present, it's already birthing new ideas and new concepts, which I think is amazing. And thank you, Jasper, for facilitating this process, really.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll be sending you details of those continuous conversations every week, every Saturday, through the same channels. So hopefully this is just the beginning of these conversations, and over the coming year, we'll have lots to report in terms of serendipity, in terms of synergy, in terms of synchronicity, with like this total kind of, without a planned kind of structured agenda, let things emerge. Let's see what happens.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Love to.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Bye for now.
Yeah, all the best, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Have a great day.
You
Have a
too.
great evening.
Good day.
Yes. Off for tea.